there are a couple of interesting tools that you can grab online. So if you go to ZFrank, ZFrank is kind of this crazy internet guy. He does this sort of true facts series. I don't know if you've seen them, like true facts about sloths. Anyways, he's got this thing. So if you just Google ZFrank, ZFrank, and then Scribbler is what it's called, Scribbler. So ZFrank Scribbler is essentially kind of this like chaos generating drawing program. So as you kind of draw out, it starts creating these connecting splines to things. So, you know, you could, in theory, try to use this software to kind of generate some chaos and noise, and you can play with different brush settings and whatnot. So, you know, this might be something to play around with. There's two versions of it. There's an older version and this more kind of current version. But like I said, you can kind of use this thing to get some inspiration and to generate some of that kind of chaotic noise that I was mentioning. So that's ZFrank Scribbler, all right? So right there, ZFrank Scribbler, and there's Scribbler 2. The next thing is the software. Again, you can download this totally for free. It's called Alchemy. I'll just Google Alchemy software. There might be a couple of other results ahead of it, but basically the one you're looking for is right here. So Alchemy, al.chemy.org, and you'll find the software. So again, you've got versions for Mac, for PC, for Linux. We've already got it installed. The basic way it works is that essentially if you have the Windows version, you have to unzip it, and then you just stick it on your C drive, and then you can create a desktop shortcut for that. So we've already got that set up in the lab, so I'm just going to double click and open this up. So if you guys want to do thumbnails and kind of generate that kind of chaos that I was talking about, you can do that very quickly in here. So by default, this thing just sort of looks like a plain sort of very basic sketching program. But as soon as you switch into some other, there's two different broad categories to look at. There's one is the create mode. So this is kind of interesting too. There's microphone shapes. So I could actually have my microphone generate random shapes via what I'm saying or whatever audio I'm putting through the mic. There's speed shapes. So as you draw really fast, it kind of generates chaos. And you can switch the style as well. So there's basically thin line style, and then there's a solid fill style. So as I draw, right, it's going to kind of create splats. And like Photoshop, if you hit X, X will invert the colors, so you can kind of like draw in white basically, or draw in black. You can also play with opacity as well, or transparency. So let me clear that screen. All right, so you can kind of come in a bit lighter and see how things will work. For me, a lot of these are a little bit too crazy. So there's X shape. So again, this might be interesting if you wanted to generate something to inspire a full-on 3D character design. The one I really like that I use a lot is, when I use it, I should say, is pull shapes. So pull shapes basically grabs from a library. And let me do this, maybe I'll clear this. I'm going to set the effect. So I went to create and pull shapes. And I'm going to go to effect and mirror. So if you're thinking about something, let's say from a face-on view, this is actually really, really useful. So I'm kind of flipping between black and white. And what it's doing is it's kind of grabbing different imagery. Basically, they're Illustrator files, right? And if you take a look, there's basically a category of shapes. So this thing says all shapes. There is a folder with just bones. So you can see the bone shapes there. And again, you can switch the style to be a full-filled sort of shape. And we can also change the transparency as well. Let me just clear this and start again. Right? So you could, in theory, start with something like this kind of chaos machine, basically, and then find shapes within this that make sense or work. So you could basically do a print screen or maybe a save as, export out a JPEG, let's say, and take it to Photoshop and then kind of clean it up. That's one way you could kind of generate ideas if you wanted to do something completely original. Again, there's different shape categories, there's something called parts. So this one is very mechanical oriented parts, which might be good for mech design, right? So I'll make this solid transparency. I'll adjust the spacing setting a bit lower just so it's a little less chaotic. Maybe a bit higher, actually. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so like I said, you may find that you kind of come up with happy accidents. I guess that's kind of the point of this using a tool like this would be to generate happy accidents. You know, to find unique designs within this software that you may not have found otherwise, right? So you can already sort of get a sense of maybe a shape, a mask, right, within this, and a lot of hardcore concept artists will use these sort of techniques either with Photoshop brushes or in a software like Alchemy to generate ideas, right? So for me, I'm not such a mech guy. I usually use like the bones folder, but you could also generate your own. So if you found images online, I'll see if I can sort of demonstrate this relatively quickly, but Illustrator, I'll go to Adobe Illustrator, and let me show you where the folder is. I think this is on our C drive somewhere. So C drive, and then I just have Alchemy loaded in the C drive. It's got a shapes folder. So in each folder, or subfolder within shapes, right, there's bones. You know, you could add a new folder and say organic shapes, right, or organics, let's say. It's very broad, but okay, let's do that. And then you could, you know, maybe Google certain things. You could look up insect legs. Let's say insect legs, right? So let's say I found a pretty good, you know, sheet of legs that I could grab. So yeah, I kind of want like a nice, simple, solid sheet that I could work with, but and maybe I'll just take one to start. We'll do that. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm actually going to bring it to Photoshop first. Mainly because I just want to make this a simple black and white image. I'll explain why in a second. So once I make it a simple black and white image, it should be easier to process. So I'll go in, create a new image, go Photoshop. Yes. Okay, so, oh man, quality of this image is actually rather poor, so maybe I'll have to grab something else. Okay. Yeah, I'm also just looking for something without a label either, so let's go large. Yeah, this might be good. All right, I'll grab this, copy image. I'm going to have to wipe out the text as well. So let's do that. So my favorite technique for bringing stuff in from a browser is basically just to copy it within the browser. So I'll just right-click, copy image. When you go to Photoshop, hit Control-N, which actually reads the size of the image from your RAM there. It'll make an image size based on what you've copied, and then you can just paste the whole thing in. So I'll go into brush. I'll use basically a large white brush, I guess. I just want to, like I said, kind of erase all this and make the brush hard so I can very cleanly and accurately kind of erase out this stuff. And then I'll probably just have to paint bucket out the, you know, I want to make these legs a solid black shape just so it'll be easier for Illustrator. So I have to turn these images essentially from raster images, which are basically pixel based, to vector based, meaning that they have sort of like splines or mathematical lines that define the kind of borders of the different shapes. And that way it'll be read properly by Alchemy if I want to use that imagery. So I'll go to Paint Bucket, and just kind of quickly swing through here and fill all this stuff in. Sometimes you might get a weird little white border, so you might have to kind of fill things a couple of times. So if you're kind of catching that, just maybe fill it twice. There. This could also be the tolerance too. You could set the tolerance maybe, I guess you'd have to set it down, but for me, I'm kind of lazy about it. I just click it a few times and it's usually pretty good. Okay. Yeah, I should try though turning this down. This might speed me up a little bit. No. 0 tolerance, not that good. Maybe I'll try a tolerance of like 80 instead. There we go. Makes it a little quicker. Okay, so once I'm done that, I'm going to just save this out quickly as a JPEG. Should be fine. Doesn't need to be super high res or anything. JPEG. Save. I always save at the highest quality though. I do want a decent sized image. I want something that Illustrator can read. So I'm going to create a new document in Illustrator. I think the standard, yeah, letter size, I think this should be okay. Let me just, there we go. I'll go to File, Place. This is kind of weird. It should be Import, but they say Place. So anyways, I'm going to place my image like so. I'm going to have to scale this thing down. So I'm going to Control, click and drag, or sorry, Shift, click and drag. If you Alt, Shift, click and drag, it'll scale from the middle and keep the image proportional, so it won't distort, you know, kind of squash the image or distort its, distort it anyway. So I'm just going to say OK, just click off of the image. And then you've got layers. So inside of Illustrator, you've got sort of layers. They're similar to Photoshop layers. So right now, I basically just got this image layer. Now, what I actually want to do with this is go to Object and do this thing called Image Trace. And I'm going to say Make. Now, it doesn't do much. So I want to sort of view the tracing results. You know, I can basically just hit Expand. And what that does all of a sudden is it sort of converts all these to solid outlines of the image. So it's converted each image in essence to a its own unique shape. So if I click on one of these, if I can grab it, let me deselect and then grab one. So now I can grab each one of these and you see it's just like a spline kind of outline of what was there. So what I'm going to do is just delete this selection. I'm going to take these 4 shapes that I have now and just drag them into the layer and outside of that group. So essentially, the way Photoshop is going to, the way Alchemy is going to read it is that each one of these legs now is essentially its own like little floating shape that it can kind of extrapolate out in the drawing software. So I'm going to go Alt-Control-S to save as. I'll go to my, so again, if I want something really creepy and insectoidal, I guess, if that's a word, I'll go into my organics and call this Bug Legs 01, yeah. So go Bug Legs 01. You know, if you want to maximize compatibility, you could save it as an old school version of Illustrator. I haven't found an issue with this though. I usually just leave the things default, mainly because when you save out an Illustrator file, by default it says create PDF compatible file. Actually, sorry, I shouldn't be exporting an Illustrator file because what Alchemy wants is PDFs. So I'll actually just save this out as Bug Legs PDF 01 PDF. There we go. So I did a save as PDF, and again, typically it will kind of make this compatible to very, very old versions of Acrobat. So I shouldn't have to worry too much about setting up compatibility. Now, if I may have to reload Alchemy. Let me clear this. Bones folder. Yeah, I don't know. This is like tanagrams here. Okay, so I'm going to close this and I'll reload Alchemy. So there's a long way to go, but like I said, if you wanted to kind of create some custom stuff some customizable chaos, you can do that with Alchemy, which is kind of fun. So again, I do want you guys to generate a few silhouettes for your projects. So I don't recall if I asked for 6 or 12, but it's in the assignment outline. I'll let you know for sure in a little bit. So I'm going to go to Pull Shapes. Instead of going to All Shapes, I'll go to Organics. And I'll choose the mirror effect. There you go. So I'll clear that again. It's kind of gross, right? So I can always just hit X to flip the colors around. Oh, look at that. There's already a face in there, right? You guys see that? What's that? Yeah, kind of. You're right. It's like a Rorschach test for sure. Yeah, that's pretty awesome, actually. I'm kind of liking it. So yeah, you could always export this out, save as, or export as a JPEG PSD, and then do a little draw over or sketch over if you want. So that's definitely one really good way to kind of come up with a unique design. So you guys, if you want, you can do fan art. Just bounce it off me first. I'll give you an idea if I would approve of it or not. I don't mind that, but I think it'd be more fun to kind of experiment and come up with something a bit unique. So now another method which I like, let me just close this up here. Yeah, one of my other sort of favorite techniques for coming up with something is to basically start with a plain old sphere in ZBrush. So, and I think I lost some of my buttons again. What's happening there? It's kind of weird. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to start with a sphere. If you want to, you should, as an initial check, go turn on the floor so you see where the bottom of your object is. And then I almost always work or start in symmetry. So you want to hit X and see where the symmetry axis is sort of lying. And it looks like from this view, right, I should be good. So I'm going to turn off the floor. And if you're starting with just a plain sphere, I do have to make this a polymesh 3D. Oh, there we go. There are all my buttons are back now. Okay. So I've got this stuff back, and I'm going to turn on Dynamesh right away. So I want to look at my active points. Right now my active points are about 43,000, which is pretty decent, right? So active points here, right? And then Dynamesh here. My resolution slider isn't too high. And what I'm going to do is basically go right into a black, dark black material. And I'm going to use the flat color. So I'm going to switch to flat color and a dark, dark black. The weird thing about this, though, ZBrush is kind of odd in many, many ways, and this is one of the ways it's bizarre. If you set the material to 100% black, so zero red, 0 green, 0 blue, it immediately defaults to this matte cap material. So you have to kind of make it just slightly off black. So let me try very carefully there. So I'm at a very, very low color value. Okay. Now, if you want as well, you can lighten, let's say, your background. So I'm going to actually set my color to a light gray. I'll go to Document and I'll say click on Back. So that's under Document, you'll see this option called Back. And what it does is it immediately grabs your sort of foreground color. So now I can get a little bit more contrast in my design, right? Okay, so now I am going to start generating some chaos, I guess. Oops. Sorry, yeah, I just got to adjust my brush fall off here, focal shift. Okay, so I'm going to grab the move brush. Always a good place to start is the move brush. Again, let's see, am I in symmetry? Where is symmetry? I've kind of lost my floor here too, so I'm kind of on a weird angle. So I'm going to just rotate this until I get back to a kind of normal angle. Again, my symmetry is kind of odd. Okay, there we go. By the way, yeah, I'm also having some weird issues in terms of the tablet. I just reinstalled it, so I'm going to go over this. This is always useful to see. So I'm going to go to mapping, make sure that you put on force proportions and that you are only using the screen that you're basically working on. So you don't want to get any weird distortion in your sketching. Also, if you ever get those like blue circles that pop up, it's Windows Ink. And in this version of the drivers, you can disable Windows Ink. And that should improve your overall tablet performance. Yeah, there we go. That's much, much better. Okay. So you can start by using the move brush. So I'm getting some weird stuff going on here. Okay. Right, so you can start by kind of looking at things from a front view, from a side view, pushing and pulling shapes. You can also try, I find snake hook can actually be really, really valuable as well for creating sort of strange, unusual shapes. So let me just show you what snake hook basically does. So I'll go to skin shade for now and turn the color back up. So snake hook is kind of like a move brush, but what it allows you to do is really pull out kind of insane, crazy shapes, right? Now it does it by distorting the mesh quite severely, so you will have to control, click, and drag in Dynamesh, which will redistribute the polys. So you'll have to kind of imagine what's happening when you're in. I tend to like to leave this in flat color as long as possible. So if you're going to use snake hook to create shapes, then yes, try to imagine or picture what's happening to this and pull it out. And if you feel like, you know, you can almost sort of tell there's some weird stretching and distortion going on, control, click, and drag, because when you're in Dynamesh, that will redistribute the polys. Okay. Okay, so, yeah, as I was saying, sorry I had to reboot because my new tablet drivers are acting bizarre again, still. Okay, so Move Tool is a really, really great option. Whoa. Right, for kind of creating shapes. So you can kind of start from a front view, get an idea of what you want, and then work in maybe a side view. So right now I'm kind of working in profile. So right now this is very sort of straightforward and simple, but I could start going with a snake hook and creating some other unusual shapes. And don't forget too, you've got this thing like select rectangle or clip curve. Remember, so for me, I've got my shortcut set up. I hit 0, which is the clip curve. And now clip curve allows me to, and for some reason when you first drag out in clip curve mode, it gives you like this weird rectangle option, but what you want is this shaded line option. So now you can start to kind of shave off parts of the mesh, right? So you can start, you know, creating some unusual shapes or patterns this way. I may go back. I often flip around quite a bit, so I'll go to the move brush. Kind of looks a bit too much like a cow skull or a horse's face. So one other thing you could do, so let's say you find a look or something that you kind of like. See, I'm kind of getting like alien horse or alien cow skull right now, so I may actually kind of go with that as a design element or aspect and just kind of figure out some proportions and where the head and neck will be. I'm going to Dynamesh this, so I'll turn on Dynamesh. Should be a good thing to turn on right away. My resolution is actually quite high, so I'm going to, my active points over here is quite high. It's at 340,000. So that means I want to kind of keep this low to begin with, so I'm going to just Dynamesh this down a bit more. Now, if you like something like this design, there's a neat trick that you can use. So I'm going to move this thing over here, okay? I'm going to hit Shift S. So what that does is it leaves a snapshot on your canvas. And then what you can do is now you're going to make a second version. So what you can do is go create under Layers. So there's a Layers palette on the right side, right? Go to Layers, add a new layer, and it's going to record your options and your changes. So I'm going to go, maybe I'll just try to inflate. Ooh. Again, I'm getting some weird stuff happening in ZBrush. I'm not sure why or what's going on exactly, but there we go. It's kind of cool. Play with this stuff a little bit. Okay, so if I like that, I'm going to put that over here. I'm going to stop recording. For some reason it goes white. Again, I'm getting some weird results right now. For some reason it decided to add a material and make it white. So let me... oh boy, what are you doing, ZBrush? I'll just hit Shift S to create a snapshot and move over. So I've turned off recording. You can turn off and on recording by hitting on the little kind of circular button there. So I can set this back to default, back to what I had initially. I'll create a new layer and make some other changes. So I may go to Snakehook now. There we go. Weird coloring. I don't get that, but maybe I have to go to Color, Fill Object, just to make sure. Yeah, it should be filling it, but for some reason it's being super bizarre. Why, ZBrush? Why? So creating some weird appendages, let's say. Go back to Move Brush. Try this from a side view. So again, this is all just sort of a loose starting point. It doesn't have to be what the final design is going to look like, but it's a way to kind of figure out some ideas and discover what it is that you're kind of looking for in the shape. And some of these may be radically different. I'm going to try to clear this. So I'm going to go with a white. So this is more of a material side note in ZBrush. So I'm going to go to a standard brush. I'm going to turn off Z add, go to MRGB. If you actually take a white material with the flat color on and fill this, so if I go color, fill document, fill object, so that's color, fill object, using a flat material and a pure white material. This should allow you to switch back to any other material and any other color without it being directly applied to the mesh. For some reason, my layering system is acting really weird with the color system, so it seems to be like deactivating it. I don't know why, but it's being rather bizarre. Anyways, I can put this over here, hit Shift S, which kind of snapshots it to the canvas, and then you can turn down that layer to 0, create another layer, and keep kind of concepting away. So the great thing about this is that once you find a design you kind of like, or a variation that you like. It's kind of interesting, actually. We can also do some other things, by the way. So if you want to go brush, I for insert, you can insert cylinders. So again, it's kind of hard to see. Oh yeah, because of layers, I can't insert or subtract. But let's say, okay, I'm going to turn this off. Do any of you guys have a favorite? They're all kind of strange, right? Original flavor.
I like the third one.
Yeah, the third one's kind of weird and alien, right? I kind of like that one too. So I'm going to bring this one back. By the way, you could save this subtool. So I could go, always a good idea to start saving in versions. So I'm going to go in here. I'll go to, let's maybe make a new folder. Call it creature concept for now. I actually usually like to give my things a name. So, oh geez, ZBrush, what are you doing to me? Well, I'll call it gross face. Seems appropriate because it's got a weird alien face, right? There's actually a kind of creature in what's it called? Starship Troopers. I think that's it. There's like a brain bug thing at the end of that movie that is kind of making me think of this. But I'm going to just hit Bake All. So what Bake All is going to do is collapse all these layers. So right now I've got the layer with the silhouette that I like. and do bake all. If you don't like the layering system and if you don't like the thumbnailing system, you can just do individual Z tools and individual silhouettes. That's fine. So I'm going to just fill the screen with that. I'm going to go to a blend material now. So I've got this horrible, horrible mess. And I've also got these multiple colors. So like I said, I'm going to go back to flat color, make sure my foreground color is 100% white. Go to color, fill object. And then if I switch now to a blend, some of these other matte cap materials, I'll see the end result here. So I'm going to go and control click and drag. Because I'm in Dynamesh, this will redistribute the polys here. Again, I usually don't want my poly count to be too high. So what I might start to do now is isolate this stuff into either poly groups or start to kind of flesh out some of the different parts here. So I'm going to go inflate. There we go. We'll bring this down a little bit. So I'm going to inflate this a bit and then control click and drag. I'm also noticing I may have made a very, very large sculpt here, so I think I'm going to just take this overall object and scale it down. For me, the simple way to do that is to go to deformation. How can I tell? Well, the one way I can tell is if I take any of the draw brushes, and I'm maxing out my draw size at 1,000. You can in fact increase the scale of your draw brush. I am drawing a blank as to where you do that, but I believe it's somewhere in preferences. I think under draw. So yeah, your max. You can either crank up your max brush size to 5,000, which is useful. So let's say you're bringing something in from Maya and it's a 6-foot tall mesh. According to ZBrush, that's like way huge. So sometimes that's actually useful. So you go preferences under draw, right? Expand draw, and then you'll see max brush size. By default, it's 1,000. You can crank it up. For me, I'm okay right now just working ZBrush's scale. I'll leave the max at 1,000. And instead, what I'm going to do is just scale down my overall models by going to size. So I'll take size and just shrink this down once, maybe twice. So now my kind of relative brush size feels more to scale. So this kind of, I don't know, immediately it feels a bit insect-like, definitely very alien-like. So usually what I start doing is kind of using the move tool to sort of figure out more of what I want to sort of find, I guess, in this model. So I'm trying to figure out, the basics, I guess, would be eyes, mouth are essential. Some creatures have ears and some creatures have just ear holes, right? So I could say, well, maybe the ears are an afterthought. Same thing with nostrils. The nostrils could be a slit or they could be a proper structure. But for me, those things are typically, it depends. If I'm going humanoid, then I need to figure out ears. I need to figure out nostrils as well. But for now, I'm kind of thinking, well, what about the mouth? Now, the other thing you can do, I often like doing this on all sorts of models, whether they're realistic, abstract, original designs, or something else. Take a gigantic move tool and try to play with the perspective of your mesh, right? Try to warp it and see what happens. If you like a certain area, mask it off. So I'm going to go to the mask option. So while I'm holding control, I'm going to switch the stroke type to a lasso. So maybe I want to protect those little appendages, but I'm not sure about the rest of this. So now I can play with kind of the background stuff here, right? So that's kind of cool. See, in terms of design too, you do want to at some point start to think about functionality. What do the different parts do? What are they? What is their function? How does this thing maybe connect to the rest of a body, let's say? So I'm kind of thinking about like maybe a neck, which is a bit more like a quadruped, right? So there'll be like a neck stump here. So I'm trying to figure that out. I'm still exploring broad shapes and stuff. Yeah, I kind of like this curvature thing that's going on here, so I'll keep playing with that. And don't forget, you can always go back to snake hook at any point too to pull out some other stuff if you want. Okay, so inflate. Because I think I want this stuff to be a little bit more rounded. I'm going to Dynamesh it all out again. So I'm losing some detail, by the way. I set my resolution slider low, and when I Dynamesh again, I'm actually dropping down to like 30,000. You know, if that's not what you want to do, you can always increase this a bit more. So let me undo once and then re-Dynamesh again. So yeah, 140,000 for me is a decent starting point. And then I'll switch over to maybe clay tubes, right? So, and you can go quite aggressive with clay tubes as well, just to sort of get a sense for what's happening here. So maybe I think as I'm exploring, you know, again, happy accidents are things that you discover as you're kind of goofing around. So for me right now, I see there's these lines pointing down. So what I'm probably going to do is maybe start to play off of that and use the damn standard brush. So this will be the start of the mouth. So this thing will have like really creepy kind of mandible-like shape here. So I'm going to carve this back. So these things might open kind of like insect pinchers, right? It's pretty gross. Okay. Again, I'm having some issues here with my brush. So I know if I'm going to go with pinchers, I may need to actually open this area up over here. So I could try to kind of cut out a region, or let's see if that'll work. Yeah, maybe something like that. There, see if that works. So I'm just using clip curve right now and just sort of slicing and hacking away at things. And then I can go back to snake hook. Let's say maybe try to pull some of this out. So again, snake hook is a bit like a move brush, but so if these things are going to be pinchers, they need to be kind of defined and have some way of pivoting and moving as well. So go back to damn standard. Maybe I'll mask this off as well, just so I don't change anything too substantial there. Let's smooth this out a bit. So a lot of it is kind of just playing around, figuring out how to define things, where to define things, when to define things too is kind of important. So maybe this will be like a little shield of sorts to protect those pinchers. So I'm going to go use a move brush. Again, I'm going to just mask this area here. I can kind of pull that down and make a bit of a shield or something for the pinchers there. Okay, so just try to give this a nice kind of evil angle there. Again, don't go too far in terms of detailing, especially because, you know, we're still kind of using this Dynamesh stuff. So yeah, I'll go back to inflate, maybe inflate this area. So a lot of it is just kind of discovering what's sort of fun and interesting to explore. I'm going to maybe start to figure out eyes. So I don't know if maybe eyes should be, you know, for me, often it's easy to figure out the eyes by creating an insert brush. So either using an insert brush or appending something like a sphere, basically. So I'm just kind of trying to figure out an opening here for the eyes to kind of fit through, maybe. I don't know if I want eyes there, if I want maybe like a series of spheres, because this is kind of insectoidal, so I'll make it some sort of like alien spider face, I guess. So I could go and append a sphere. That's one way to do it. So I'll move the sphere. I'm going to turn off symmetry in this case and scale this down. So again, I tend to use the deformation panel, and I'll just go to size. So again, I want to make sure I'm on the right subtool. So I'm going to go to the sphere, and let's actually move this out and forward and just take the size down a bit. You know, especially like something I kind of forgot about when I started sculpting is that the eyes can actually define quite a bit of what's kind of going on in your either a human face, a creature face, whatever it might be. So you want to sort of place the eyes to get a sense of the character. It's a really, really useful tool to start to play with. Now, if you're in Subtool, by the way, so let's say I'm getting a sense, okay, I want the eyes to maybe come across these slits or openings. I can very easily go to Z plugin, right? Subtool master, and then I'm going to go to mirror. Now by default, the options are merge into one subtool and flip on the x-axis. So what it does is it duplicates the subtool as a second subtool, flips it across on the x-axis, and then merges it together into one subtool. So the default options are typically fine. There we go. Now, while you're using a move brush, if you hold Control and move, actually I should do this in symmetry now because I've got a symmetrical sphere. I'm going to hold Control and move. Control and move. Right? This thing is starting to take on some life. And you see that, right? As soon as you add eyes or any kind of structure there, you begin to change the sculpt or the impression of the model. Now, if I go to Subtool, these things are all part of one subtool. I should actually undo this a little bit, and I'll show you a little trick, because grabbing these things after can be very, very difficult. If I hit Shift F, let me zoom in to these. They each have their own poly group. So let me just turn off the line here. So each of these has a different color, meaning that if I control click on one, it'll mask one and make the other available to move. So I can break symmetry. But what I want to do is hit Control W and make them both part of the same group. So that way, if I now control click and drag and move, these other ones are masked, and if I Control W again, I can now grab these very easily in pairs. You see? So if I Control tap on the blue group, it isolates that blue group and I can move it and position it. So this is just like a little bit of file management, I guess, in this case. Control click and drag. So Control click on the blue group, and then I can Control move. And before I clear the masking, so these other two groups are now masked, if I Control hit, oh, wait a minute. Screwed up a bit. I'm going to flip the mask around and hit Control W. So now the third pair of eyes here has their own group. So that way I can Control tap on that red group or pink group and move them into position. Okay, so it's good. It's very useful to have these different kind of poly groups, so you can very quickly grab one pair or another pair and isolate them or do something unique to them. Okay. Now the other great thing about this is once I have all of them exposed, I could, in theory, just Control, click, and drag upwards, and then use the move brush to sort of slide these into place. Maybe use the rotate tool to kind of rotate this back and in. Right. Get out of transparency mode there. It's kind of fun. I mean, it's far from done, so I would continue to develop this sculpt into something usable. I may take a number of different changes or tacks when I go through sculpting this, so this might wind up still becoming very different in the end, but at least this is a starting point to doing more unique pieces and sculpts, right? So hopefully that kind of gives you guys an idea of how to start from nothing. The point is really to have fun, and if it doesn't go anywhere, usually you know within 20-30 minutes and you can try something else, right? First do a series of thumbnails, whether in 2D, 3D, or hybrid, and most importantly have fun with it, okay?